the years we spoke to him and he said, well, I was frightened you might hit these things, and they hit us back and retaliate and destroy us.
Yes.
So what did they look like then?
They were just like orange, yellowy footballs.
Yeah.
They were glowing. A yellow little bit of orange coming into it, and all of a sudden they were following us, and we dived and they followed us. We twisted, we climbed, and they followed us.
So it was just as though they were intelligent then, and they seemed to know by changing direction.
I mean, they were in control.
Yes.
And you saw that after 15 miles, and we lost 14,000 feet of height, they started to fade away.
Yes.
But at times they put on extra speed, and when they sort of, they're going along, and when they did that, there was sparks, things coming out of the tails. Or behind them.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting.
But what they were...
Yes, you don't know.
I never knew.
Did you ever think it was the other side that had a new...
I thought they were probably rocket... you think a lot about this, and I wonder whether they were controlled anti-aircraft shells.
Right,
But of course, no one's ever spoken about this.
No.
I wonder when they were controlled anti-aircraft shells, controlled by radar. But no one ever mentioned, and nothing's been mentioned about this since, have they?
Know what it is? We cannot identify it. It looks like three silver discs far away. If you take one dime at arm length, that's about the size I can figure out. Then suddenly two vanish, and I mean vanish. Blue sky, I vanish. And one, the time to say 1, 2, 3, make a long circle with crashing green, blue, red, everything on the back, towards us, pass between us and the mountain, like a lightning, and went zigzag and disappeared. When he passed, I had a green light in my cockpit, a matter of a fraction of a second. And I remember I can see something, hard to say, 15, maybe 20, 25 feet diameter, like a disc, went under us and disappeared. But the next things, and a little tinkling around me, okay, we were tired. And then the thing I see, I look, all my instruments, they were all getting crazy. My Sperry compass was going counterclockwise about that speed. All the other instrument was going this crazy. And I said, of course I have the answer today. But I said, holy smoke, what's going on? And when that took place, my two wings went sky high, yelling, and the interphone, what's going on? Shit, I'm back and all that. I said, hey, back. And then I said, no radar, no nothing, navigation. What can we do? Radio wasn't functioning anymore. Well, lucky when I think about it, our magneto was still going on. That's still a mystery, because what happened today? I know high level of magnetic field. Okay. So fortunately, above the mountain, I saw the base far away. Thanks God. So we all land, and you see three exciting guys were going down there. We arrive, and like normally, we had to do our reports. On our report, we say everything like it happened. And that's why the CEO, when he began to read that, he looked at us, he picked up the phone, and he says, Doc, I got to send you three guys. They got mass hallucination. They're very, very tired. Give them, and we had to go. I was mad. I said, what? 20 minutes? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, God, no, it's not possible. What's going on? I mean, is that a secret weapon, a new secret weapon of the German? The briefing and the intelligence in each briefing should tell us nothing of that kind. What is this? We can't fight that. If that's a secret a weapon of the Germans, I say we can't fight that. We lost the war. going gloriously with our plane at 450 miles, So finally, I took the CEO to the hangar and I said, "Sir, you better tell us what's happening. You must know more than we know. What is happening? Look what happened inside of the plane." It was 1 hour after. The mechanics has to take all those instruments out on the three plane. And he went crazy. He said, "Wow, all this smoke, I don't know." Well, if you don't know, you better believe our story. We were grounded 4 days. The second day, we had some VIP coming early in the morning. We had to be put inside a room, questioned. Oh, Colonel plus his aide and everything. "Gentlemen," he says, "you are not crazy. You are not having hallucination. You have seen the right things." Oh my God, I said, I'm going to see something. We are going to know what's going on. Yeah, but meanwhile, the aide make us sign some paper, You don't remember everything, you haven't seen nothing, military secret, and that's about it. Otherwise, the war is finished for you. 1945. And that was the end of it.
I was in the 5th Air Force serving in an intelligence capacity.
Okay.
And I was one of, as I recall, 12 GIs, members of my unit, flying into Japan. We were designated to be the first Americans into Japan, which was 3 days before they officially surrendered. And I was flying in a C-46 transport plane as one of the passengers. And we left the island of Ieshima, spelled Ieshima. It's right, a little island right off Okinawa. And our destination was Iwo Jima, a very famous island in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a staging area for our final hop to Atsugi, Japan, near Tokyo, where we were to land and take over the Atsugi Air Base for the occupation troops to follow 3 days later. So that's the background. And it was during the flight between Ieshima and Iwo Jima that I had aboard the plane, encountered what I recall to be 3 unidentified balls of light. And this was from the left-hand side of the plane, looking forward. And it was just a momentary glimpse, really. It wasn't any long duration. Probably if I recall correctly, perhaps in view for 30 seconds, maybe less. And there was no sound. I just casually looked out the porthole, window, and it caught my attention with some brilliant light. And looking out the window, I saw what I distinguished to be 3 objects coming out of a heavy cloud bank, moving sort of obliquely toward and forward to the aircraft that I was on. And I'll never be able to discern just exactly the shape. It appeared to be roundish, maybe teardrop almost. The teardrop effect might have been a result of the bright light, leaving a slight retinal effect. The eyeball picks up electric glow of light. But anyway, they pursued, got reasonably close. Again, it was hard to judge that. You had no reference point, so maybe I'm talking in terms of 100 feet, maybe a little bit further than that, away from the aircraft. But there were 3 objects, and they were brilliant in color. They're very bright.
How large were they?
I'll never know. I believe that they were not large. They were not really teeny things. My judgment on that, and I try to think back, and I have no way of knowing, but maybe 15 feet in diameter.
Okay.
That's just a guess. It could have been 10. It could have been 20. But as they approached the aircraft, our plane suddenly dipped and dropped approximately 25 to 50 feet, maybe more, just straight down. And in my opinion, it was a result of the proximity of the so-called Foo Fighter, and that I had witnessed. And then apparently there was some disturbance up in the cockpit of the plane, although I had no access to the pilot or the co-pilot, and I was sitting in the back. Now later, when I talked to one of the fellows aboard the craft, after I was off the plane and even back in the States, I discussed this with him, and he said that there was some concern about the performance of the aircraft at that time by the pilot. He was sitting up in the front of the plane, although I did not observe this. And the objects, as our airplane descended suddenly, the objects just suddenly vanished, retreated back into a cloud bank and disappeared. And then what really surprised me was that the aircraft picked up its lost altitude and flew on to Iwo Jima safely. And there was no Foo Fighters in sight, or were there any other, unusual occurrences within the craft. Now, when I got off the airplane in Iwo Jima, I noticed oil had splashed all over the side of the craft from the left engine. Although I have no way of knowing that that had anything to do with the Foo Fighters.
The sightings we saw I think were in about in the 44 on November or December. Then we'd see these balls of light that would fly off the wings of our airplane. The one I saw was like a white light. A lot of the other people reporting in it saw red lights, and some of them would see some green lights, and some of them reported that they would try to chase one while they never could catch it.
We'd turn into it, and it would turn with us. And we'd turn away from it, and it would still turn with us. And I put my gun sights on, trying to get on it, but I never could.
We flew the British Mosquito, which was capable of 450 knots, and we opened it up a number of times and tried to close with it, and we never came anywhere close to it. I think the book is open on whether it was imagination, hallucination, or really extraterrestrial or ground-controlled object, but I haven't seen anything in 50 years that changed the perception of what they were other than unidentified flying objects.
In 1942, in June, we went on the bombing mission. I was flying bombers, Wellingtons, over Ruhr, or otherwise so-called Happy Valley. And the trip was, we performed everything what was necessary, dropped the bombs on the target, and on the way back, while we were flying over the Zuiderzee, which is the part of Holland, my rear gunner reported an aircraft approaching from the rear. I told him that if this object comes too close, then we'll have to open the fire on him. And my idea was that perhaps it was a German fighter aircraft equipped with the searchlight in the nose. So when this thing came close, I wouldn't take any chance on it, and I told my rear gunner to give him a blast. So then he opened the fire on him, maybe 200 yards. And at that distance, this object was almost the size of the moon, which was also visible at the same time, maybe possibly a bit bigger. We used the tracers in the machine guns. There were 4 machine guns in the rear turret. And while this rear gunner was shooting, we could follow exactly the trajectory of the shells which were entering that particular target. Now, the peculiar thing about it was that those were just going in, and that was the end of it. They wouldn't fall down. and so-called tracers. Those tracers would just enter, and that was it. Now, that lasted for possibly, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes. And after that time, this shining object suddenly changed the position and at a terrific speed moved over to our port side, almost at the same distance, about 200 yards from the wing. And then it stayed there. Of course, then both rear gunner and the front gunner opened the fire on my order, and I could see the tracers entering the target again from under two angles, at which I was sure that this was pretty close to 200 yards then, because you could see the angle of crossing the tracers. After a while, it moved up, took off at fantastic speed at least 45 degrees angle, and they just disappeared between the stars.
World War II was the first great air war. Weapons of mass destruction were airborne, and technology was moving forward at an unprecedented rate. Axis and Allied powers were constantly on alert for the latest secret weapon. Germany had the V-1 rocket. England had advanced radar, an unblinking eye in the sky. And America was hard at work developing the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb. And, says research scientist Richard Haynes, the belief that the other side could have developed just about anything may have concealed the largest mass UFO sighting in history.
There were sailors on ships. There were GIs on the ground in artillery battalions. There were German soldiers on the other side of the line. People from all sides of the war were involved and reported the same thing.
Pilots described them as seemingly guided balls of light. Bob Leroy, a member of the 11th Airborne in New Guinea, remembers his first sighting of the mysterious craft.
Suddenly I saw this ball about this size, that thing there about 3 feet in diameter, following this Japanese Betty bomber. And it started changing colors. I thought I had seen a new secret weapon. I had to agree with the rest of the guys because that's what they all thought it was. They didn't know any better. And nobody had ever heard of a UFO in 1944.
They were spotted around the world and became known as Foo Fighters, from the French word for fire. According to Haynes, who has investigated hundreds of newspaper and eyewitness accounts, the descriptions of the Foo Fighters are disturbingly alike.
Pilots would report glowing, luminous balls of light that would come up from the ground, often orange or red, anywhere from 1 foot to 6 feet in diameter, would accelerate up to their altitude and then level off very quickly and then stay beside the airplane. They would fly either singly or in pairs or in trio or 4 objects, oftentimes in rigid formation, which is important. And all of these flight dynamics point in one way or another to a fairly high intelligent level of guidance.
Robert May was the tail gunner on a B-24 for the last 2 years of World War II. He vividly recalls a dangerous top-secret mission to drop guns and ammunition behind German lines. But it wasn't the nature of the mission that has stayed with Robert for more than a half-century. It's what he saw up there.
I spied something out there. It was kind of bright. Didn't know if it was an aircraft or what it was. I'd say it was probably traveling at a fairly decent speed, maybe 200 miles an hour, 300 miles an hour, and it was coming toward us, but it was coming in a bright light. That's what made it so odd, that we could not identify, because we all knew exactly whatever enemy aircraft was there. We knew what it was. It was very easy, because that's one of the things we learned real quick. Like,
the Allies thought it was the Nazis that it was the Allies. Then the fireball showed up in Japan.
And here, from the November 1944 issue of the New York Times, is a very interesting case of a B-29 flying over Japan, and the flight crew saw several Foo Fighters.
Intelligence services for both Allied and Axis forces were hard at work trying to figure out where the Foo Fighters were coming from, says Mark Birdsall of UFO magazine.
British intelligence was interested as well. They've released reports. They tried very, very hard to put a category on it, to classify it as a night fighter or an enemy bomber or something other than that. But it proved useless. They couldn't do it.
To this day, no one has figured out what they were or who made them.
I don't think there's any way that in 1943 or 44 or 45, terrestrial technology was advanced enough to produce the kind of flight dynamics, the containment of energy, the luminous output for as long as we're talking about here.
And Foo Fighters did not go away when World War II ended. Military pilots reported seeing them during the Korean War. And were it not for the code of silence of modern-day pilots, there might be continuing reports today. Take the case of this former Soviet fighter pilot who claims to have had an encounter with a Foo Fighter.
I gained the altitude of 3,900 meters, and I saw a ball in front of me about 20 degrees to the right.
In 1991, Maxim Cherbakov was at the top of his class, fast on his way to becoming Russia's top gun. Then, on a training flight, Cherbakov said that he was chased by an aggressive UFO that sent his plane into a nosedive.
My altitude began to drop rapidly. I had to pull the plane out of the nosedive. At the altitude of 1,000 meters, I finally cleared the residential area and I ejected. 4 seconds later, the plane exploded.
Cherbakov's admission that he had seen a fireball under intelligent control cost him his career. For pilots around the world, this only strengthened their resolve to keep the code of silence. As a result, we are no closer to solving the Foo Fighter mystery than we were 50 years ago.
There's a possibility that Foo Fighters could have been or still are guided and controlled, created, produced by an advanced intelligence, not of this planet. But that is a difficult thing to prove, clearly. I'd like to simply let the evidence speak for itself and to continue to do research on the subject and then simply let the chips fall where they may.